Bola Abisogun is founder and executive director of Construction Managers Urbanis. Bola is well known for encouraging greater ethnic diversity in construction and was awarded an OBE for services to diversity and to young people in the construction industry in 2019. He's founder and chair of Diversity Surveyors, which offers support services and training to BAME surveyors who are members of the RICS, and has been chair of Moving On Up, an initiative supported by the Mayor of London since its formation in 2014. So perhaps we could start, and you could tell me, what sort of projects are you working on at Urbanis at the moment?
Well, funnily enough, Bridget, and thanks, for the invitation and such a warm introduction to it. So pretty much we started out in 2003 as a package subcontractor offering repairs and maintenance contracts in the public sector for mostly tier 1 contractors. And, pretty much done the same sort of work for 15, 16 years. And then in 2018, we hit a huge bump as a consequence of some maladministration and by the client side, that was. And we took the view that actually I wanted to go back to my first love, which was fixing the sector. And one of the things that came out during the 15, 16-year window of experience delivering an R&M work in the public sector was that there were so many challenges around delivering projects successfully. So I put my PQS hat on, refused to do any more traditional quantity surveying work, and decided to focus on procurement, cost and value challenges in the public sector, but specifically in the R&M space, trying to some degree to improve the OPEX £8 billion circa per annum spend by the public sector. And that's pretty much what I'm doing now, albeit I've morphed into a role where I'm now working with Homes England, CDB, the Centre for Digital Britain, and a number of public sector local authorities and housing providers around transitioning from their traditional model, which has been quite analog, into the digital piece, which is now becoming much more relevant. So actually, that's what I'm doing now on a full-time basis. I'm down literally to 2 of us in the business now, so we've scaled down completely as a consequence of all the things we know that have happened. But fundamentally, I'm growing a different kind of team now, where we're actually providing a strategic advice service offer, which talks about our collective experience as practitioners, something in the order of about 100 years now. And we're offering that 360 degrees perspective to client-side stakeholders and saying, look, we understand your pain points. Let us help you in a journey of transition. So that's pretty much what I'm getting involved in now.
But you're pretty involved in voluntary sector as well. So tell me how diversity works and how you're currently helping young surveyors. Well,
the challenge that I've had as an individual, as a practitioner, literally once I qualified in 1990,000, was that I just didn't feel like I belonged. And I challenged my profession, the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, around, what can you do to help people like me, more so who want to leave the corporate world and do something independent. And that conversation sparked in my role, a challenge around winning the hearts and minds of the profession and the sector to understand why it was that there was a disconnect. So I formed Diversity Surveyors in 2005-06, and it was pretty much at that time a whinge club for about half a dozen Black surveyors. We met 2 or 3 times a year, had a really good chat, had a few drinks, just complained about what wasn't going well, how we could tackle it. And I remained the dreamy optimist. Most of my peer group left, they're still overseas now. But out of that situation, I began to challenge the sector and the profession. And gradually over time, I began to articulate a perspective that perhaps for many had been just overlooked and misunderstood. But then actually about 4 or 5 years ago, I met with the exec team and said, look, I'm happy to put my neck on the block and really help you as a professional body to articulate the position. And from that point, it just morphed into a real machine of sharing lived experience, for want of a better word. So members began to migrate towards us. The common denominators were, well, we understand where you're coming from. Yeah, we've had the same thing. We have the same challenges. I then started to focus on having the conversation with business owners and some of the major firms. They too were willing, albeit jaded in terms of the how. So we've just grown from doing everything from early schools engagement to helping undergrads become ABC qualified. They get qualified, where do they go, how do they scale, etc. So it's pretty much, we're almost like an advocacy arm for non-traditional talent pool. And by that, I mean, if you're not traditionally from a white background and you have had issues around just securing work, scaling the corporate ladder, engaging with others, we've become that safe space. But actually, we're now much more of an inclusive environment because a lot of people are migrating and we have a lot of allies now. So it's been quite a journey, 15, 16 years long, but it's been quite a journey.
But the built environment professions historically have low rates of diversity. And the important thing is obviously to get people from schools coming into the professions. How does one encourage more BAME students to decide to take up built environment professions?
Well, I think what I've done is put myself out there. One of the things that was lacking for me personally as a young or younger surveyor was that I didn't see people that looked like me in senior positions, and it worried me. And so that inability to identify with the potential of scaling the ladder very early in my career gave me a big cause for concern. And I ended up in the US. It's how I ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, because I was so frustrated of not seeing. I started to do searches online about, well, where are these, sector leaders that look like me? And they all tended to be migrating in the US, or of course, on the African continent. But my question was, well, what about Europe, and specifically the UK? So I think what I decided to do was put myself out there, share my experience, and start to engage in the conversations that actually there was a huge demand and still is. And I think what I've tried to do now is get my peer group to commit to sharing their stories and committing to spend some time educating others, themselves and the industry, around what it means to be a BAME professional, me being the Black in BAME, but also what it means to pursue excellence. Because one of the things I'm constantly challenging and trying to articulate is the fact that we are at the top of our game. I think for me personally, I've been told by many, and even my mother, that I have reached the ceiling and where do I go next? But actually, Peter, it's about redefining myself. So again, to our earlier conversation, it's why I'm challenging my own skill set today as a quantity surveyor. I no longer refer to myself as a quantity surveyor. I'm more of a strategic advisor. But the point is, I'm using my QS skill set to do other things, including move into the digital space around digital twins. But that whole sharing of my why with the audience, the captive audience, which is growing, is one of the ways I think we can instill and inspire younger people to think about, actually, I might give that a go. And it works. It really does.
So what inspired you to become a surveyor in the first place?
Oh, Peter, I mean, I think my parents were responsible for my love for construction. They bought me one of the largest Lego sets as a child. So it started there really, but the identification of the role of the QS happened where, I was a jobbing builder as a teenager. So I worked on many sites, and there was one site in particular I worked on, and it was a Friday afternoon, and the site manager just erupted into a frenzy of telling everybody to tidy up the site. And I just couldn't understand it. And then about 2 or 3 hours into the working day, a young man turned up with a clipboard, shirt and tie, suit on, and he was just parading the site, making notes. And when he'd left, I asked the question, I said, who was that guy? That was the QS, he's gonna pay us. Oh, really? I wanna be like him. And that's where the penny dropped. But I had there's no family connection, there's no social capital in speech marks, it was literally that vision and that experience of someone having that level of authority on a site that I thought, that's right, interesting. And because the skill set requires mathematics, construction tech, debating via law, and just general awareness of, to your point, reuse, recycle, and repair, it just made sense that all the core tenes of the skill set were within me. And I challenged myself at university, but that's how it happened.
Fascinating. So what's your advice to firms who are wanting to improve their levels of diversity, and how do we attract more BAME students into construction?
Well, I think on the role of firms, there's a lot of advice out there. You know, I've done a lot of work, as you know, with the Mayor's Office via my initiative called Movement Up, and actually it's funded by Trust for London and City Trust, two great funding institutions, all about poverty, social deprivation, hard to reach, disenfranchised, etc. They tackle all of the challenges that people just tend to talk about. And they decided to pick on a group of young people, specifically young Black men, because statistically their lived experience is just a lot worse. And out of that work, we have produced what the Mayor of London now calls the Inclusive Employer Toolkit. And it's available online. And basically it is a ground zero for firms who have struggled but want to challenge themselves around how can we do this better? And pretty much that's my go-to source. There's lots of other things they can use, but they've got to essentially find some evidence that makes the business case within their business, depending on size, make sense. But also they've got to own it. Someone in the business has to own the aspiration about the BAME challenge, as I call it. And they've got to be honest. They've got to be willing to be embarrassed. They've got to listen, and they have to allow people to thrive. And you know, it should be no different from the traditional talent pool. It should just be on the premise that we recognize historically this is an area that we have done well in as a sector and as an employer, with a moral compass, concern of our people and staff, and our outward-facing PR. I think it just makes sense for a lot of people to jump on board. And for the young people, they need to understand who the early adopters and the champions are. And they can do that by just almost following, particularly on social media now, what these businesses are doing. So I think there's much more opportunity now to get it right. I think there's more of an appetite to do it better, but I'm still out, the jury's still out on whether we'll do it in the next 25 years. It's taken me 25 years to get here, God willing, but you know, I'm optimistic. It will happen as soon as possible.
Well, Bola, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much. And thank you for all the splendid work you're doing.
Well, it's my pleasure, Peter. And you stay safe. It's been an awesome conversation. We must do it again sometime.
Very good. Thank you.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye.